Now we want to go live to Jerusalem and bring in Alex Traiman. He is the CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you for joining us this morning. What reaction are you expecting from Israelis to what Secretary of State Blinken had to say just within the last hour, standing there in a show of support with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, at the one hand, the show of support is important, and Israelis understand that the United States has its back. Important to note that Blinken said that how democracies carry out these reprisals matter. And that Israel, everything is going to be dependent on Israel limiting civilian casualties, which is extraordinarily difficult because Hamas hides itself behind civilians as a tactic of war. And so the question is, will America have Israel's back throughout an extended campaign in order to make sure that Hamas is completely dismantled as a governing entity there? I think that's the question that most Israelis are asking right now.
So today there's going to be a meeting of the new unity government that was formed yesterday. We know that was between Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Benny Gantz. As I mentioned earlier in the last hour, Gantz is a member of the opposition, so they're not necessarily on the friendliest of terms, you could say. But that really underscores just how big of a crisis this is. What is the response that you're hearing from people about what this means for Israel and their ensuing attacks?
Well, the unity government is a reflection of the unity that's now within the country. All Israelis, whether you support Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu or whether you support the opposition, recognize that this isn't a time for petty politics. This is a time for war. Every single Israeli knows people that have been brutally killed. Every single Israeli knows troops that are now stationed along the Gazan border, potentially waiting for an incursion. And it's not time anymore to think about right, left, religious, secular. This is a time for all Israelis to stand together, and they are standing together, and the unity government's just a reflection of that.
And one thing that's really stood out to me over the past couple of days is every military analyst that we will speak with, whether it's a general, whether it's someone who, an admiral, it is just how complicated and how challenging a military operation on the ground would be in Gaza, because it is one of the most densely populated areas on planet Earth. In Israel, it is a priority, it is a requirement for many Israelis to serve in the military. More than 300,000 have been called up to serve in this situation. Heading into what will be such a complicated military operation, just how prepared is the IDF, is the Israeli military to take this on?
Well, first of all, the Gaza Strip isn't necessarily more densely populated than New York City or other populated areas, including Tel Aviv, which is densely populated. But it is an urban environment, and one that is likely to be heavily booby-trapped with many, many Hamas members armed to the hilt with assault rifles. And so it's a major, major risk for Israeli soldiers to go in. The soldiers would go in on foot is because they want to limit the number of Palestinian casualties instead of hitting by air. So it will be very, very dangerous battle for Israelis to go in, but they have objectives, which is to make sure that Hamas has no more military capability whatsoever, so they can never carry out an attack like they did on Saturday ever again.
Yeah, Prime Minister Netanyahu saying in that joint press conference earlier, Hamas should be treated how ISIS was treated, and any country who harbors them should be sanctioned. I want to ask about the hostage crisis, because that kind of plays into what Chris was asking you about, because there are hostages as well as innocent people that just live in Gaza. What toll is that crisis taking on a personal level, and what are the concerns as the days grow longer without them returning home?
Well, obviously, this is the part that tears at the hearts and souls of Israelis the most. Israelis value every single life so deeply, and the idea that their loved ones are under the are being held in Gaza right now. It's just you can't even describe the pain and the emotion that Israelis are feeling. But at the same time, there's over 1,300 already dead, and there's another 3,000 plus wounded, many of them seriously, so the death count is expected to rise. And by contrast, the number of hostages is much smaller. And of course, Hamas wants to use the hostages as a lever against Israel to limit the reprisal. But Israel has to make sure that not only can it get its hostages back, but that it can prevent Hamas from taking hostages ever again in the future. That's the most important objective for the military and the politicians right now.
And I think another thing that stood out to me is, and I think of the United States being so large, and you think of how far conflict can feel away. For you, I mean, being in Jerusalem, I believe it's only about 50 miles from the Gaza Strip. Just how does it feel closer than perhaps conflicts in the past between Hamas and Israel from where you are in a major city?
Well, all of Israel has been under the attack of Hamas rocket fire. There's been over 10,000 rockets and missiles fired at all Israeli population centers since Saturday. Israelis all over, including in Jerusalem, have had to run into bomb shelters continuously. There's the threat that northern front could emerge as well, and with Hezbollah having over 150,000 missiles and rockets that they could fire on Israeli population centers. And so if it does in fact feel very close, and as I said also, Israel's a very tight-knit community, and everybody knows someone who's been killed or kidnapped, and everyone knows has a brother, a best friend, a son or a daughter or father that's been called up to the military. So Israel's a very, very tiny place, smaller than the state of New Jersey, and everybody feels it.
Yeah. All right. Alex Traiman, CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Stay safe, and our thoughts are with you. Julie?